Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this week's online webinar brought to you by Hope on the Sunni Dawati Islami platform. Just a gentle reminder for our viewers, if you've missed any of the previous sessions, they're still available on the SDI Media YouTube channel. And if you prefer to listen to these programs on the podcast, they're available on Spotify, Google, and many other podcast platforms. During these sessions, if you have any questions and you have connected through the Zoom, there is a section of the question and answer. Please feel free to send your questions through there. Or if you're connected through the YouTube, please feel free to use the chat section, and inshallah our guest will answer these questions towards the end of the sessions. If any of our brothers and sisters have any questions outside these sessions, please feel free to email us on teamhopesdi@gmail.com. Finally, if you are on social media, and I would request all our viewers, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and also LinkedIn. Now, today's topic is on the complete guide to an interview, and our guest speaker has previously covered the topic on how to beat robots with your CVs. I would like to welcome our guest, Brother Mohsin. Assalamu alaikum. Are you there?
Walaikum salam. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
MashaAllah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad.
Good. MashaAllah. Nice to have you again.
Inshallah.
I will pass this session over to you now. However, before you do delve into your topic, can you please, just for the benefit of our new viewers, just share with us your background, inshallah.
Sure. Jazakallah. First of all, my name is Mohsin. I'm Preston born and bred. I've been fortunate to have a previous seminar regarding how robots work. In terms of my background, my academic background has been in accounting. I worked in accounting. I then spent many years in banking, decided to leave the industry, run my own business, and more recently, I now work as a headhunter. Very similar to recruitment, I take the full 360 approach, which basically means I provide support for my clients who are looking to recruit staff. I provide support to candidates who are looking to look for a new opportunity, and I cover the UK and European markets. I tend to specialize in the medical sector. However, in the past, I have covered generic recruitment, so I have worked in accounting, legal, etc. My previous seminar was all about how robots select CVs. We are coming into a time where it's increased technology usage, especially with the current pandemic. We're relying a lot more on virtual platforms. So the previous seminar was all about how to tailor your CV. Today's seminar is going to be more about how to guide you prepare for your initial interviews. I'm just going to try and share the screen to make sure it's all working and log on to the system. Now, first of all, today's presentation is all about providing a complete interview guide. As we all know, when it comes to interviews, there's no right or wrong answer, and it's very difficult to prepare. But what I can do using the experience I have gained over the years is to provide you with the basics of making sure we are prepared when we go for a job interview. Some of the key areas which I will talk about will be how to prepare to be the best. It's quite crucial that if we get a good start in our interview, we will be basically working towards getting through, if not getting to the next stage. I will talk about having a strong start. The first 5 minutes are quite crucial. That could determine if you are going to be successful or not. So we want to make sure we are confident and fully prepared. I will talk about the key, or should I say, the most important interview questions you could potentially be asked, the most common interview questions every hiring manager may potentially ask you. We'll also talk about some of the common interview mistakes we could make. Sometimes it's subconscious, sometimes we just get nervous, we can get anxious, but if we are fully prepared, we can quite easily eliminate these questions. Virtual interviews. Since the pandemic in March, we've seen an increased number of virtual interviews. We need to make sure we cover all the basics. I guess whether we're in college, universities, we're working, virtual interviews are going to be a thing for the future. And finally, there'll be a few brief details about how to get in touch with me and how I can support you. First thing, preparing to be the best. Why is it important to prepare to be the best? I see it all the times. Great candidates being passed over because they don't prepare for an interview properly. If you don't have the full skill set and you can still land the job by being prepared, enthusiastic, and you really want to show the clients that you really want the opportunity. Why should you prepare? It's quite evident that the importance of preparation cannot be overstated. As well as boosting your confidence, it will help you show your best version in the interview. Normal first stage interviews predominantly last from 40 minutes to an hour. We want to showcase our talent, make sure that whatever we put on our CV can be transparent, and we can basically tell them why we should be considered. Interviewers tend to test candidates regarding their preparation. Normally, the more enthusiastic you are about the company, the more prepared you are, the more you know about them. It's highly likely that the interviewer will be able to see this. And what we will do is prepare to demonstrate how serious we are about this interview. The first thing I'm going to talk about is hiring manager's first question. We will talk about this throughout the interview. But one of the first questions most interviewers will ask the interviewer is asking them about what they know about the company. I always start by asking people to explain what we do as a business. Why is this important? Because this deceptive, very simple question can floor a lot of people. It's amazing how many interviewers struggle to answer the most basic question. But if you don't understand the company you've applied for, if you don't understand what they do, how are they going to take an interest in you? And normally interviewers can tell if you have done your research, if you have done your interview, if you are really bothered about the interview, or if you're really bothered about the job. So I will talk about some of the key areas we need to talk about. First thing is all about preparation. In order to prepare, we have to research. Before you go for a job interview, it's always best to read the company website, have a look at the social media, read about their homepage, understand their service and their products. The keynotes you want to talk about is the history of the company. When was it established? Why was it established? What did they do? And what's their vision? We want to learn more about their ethos and their mission statement. What do they hope to achieve? And most importantly, more about their growth. Where are they heading? And for you to do that, there's various methods we've just talked about. Also, if you are going for a senior role or a technical role, it's always advised to look at the company accounts, which are easily available, and basically can get a lot more information about how they've done their profitability. And that would support you, and it would show the interviewer that this person is serious, they've done their homework, they're quite keen on this role. Now, some of the things you might want to talk about is more issues regarding the company. It's a good idea to learn a bit more about their competitors. By learning about the competitors shows that you are serious about this role and you are quite interested. One of the things I advise is something called a SWOT analysis, the strengths of the company, the weaknesses, what opportunities and threats that company has, and most important, the unique selling point. What is it about that company that's really interested you? And why are you going for this role? Learn. One of the things I always say is learn your CV off by heart fluently. So when you do get asked questions, you can basically talk about it. Interviewers can tell when you're not prepared, and interviewers can tell if you put something on your CV that shouldn't be there or it's not accurate. The key things you should be fluent about is your employment history, all your previous roles. This includes the job title, what your responsibilities were, and the reason for leaving. And when it comes to reason for leaving, there's various reasons, whether it's because you got promoted, you're looking for advancement in your salary, it was natural progression, or simply you just did not feel that role was for you. In that case, I'll talk about how we discuss this area. You want to make sure you can talk about any achievements in that company, any sales targets you hit, any promotions you had, and why your skills and experience match the job description for the role you've gone for. Make it easier for the interview to know that you're a great fit. You really want them to say, I really do like that person. They've got so much to offer. We do want to hire you. And it's always best to read up on your previous employers because they will ask you questions. If it is the same industry, it's highly likely they will know someone from your previous company, and there will be a lot of tenuous links in there. And the second thing, another thing you want to do, Once you've learnt your CV, it's practice before the interview. And how can you practice? First of all, do a mock interview. Ask somebody you can trust if they could ask you certain questions, or just read up on the company. Another thing is, I used to do it when I was younger, practice in front of a mirror. That's the only way you can become quite confident in your approach. Devising questions. Why is this important? When you go for job interviews, towards the end, it will be a case for you to ask them questions. Interviews are not a one-way process where they will fire all the questions to you. It's a chance for you to ask them why they should join you. It's for a chance for you to find out if that company really is for you. And it is a two-way process. So think of some of the questions you might want to ask them. For example, if you are impressed with certain stuff about the company, show that you're enthusiastic, show that you are impressed by the company, and just go the extra mile to prepare certain questions that you could ask towards the end. Some of the questions you might want to ask about is the actual person who's interviewing you. Have a look at their LinkedIn profile. Is their photo on their website? Find out if you have any tenuous links. If there's any companies they worked at that you have worked for, at least it can build up a conversation. Be creative and imaginative. And one of the key things you don't really want to do at the first stage interview is talk about pay and benefits unless they bring the topic up. On the day of the interview, it is quite crucial that we are fully prepared. While the interview is important, there are certain things we need to plan. For example, what are we going to wear, the transport routes, and what should we take with us? Because of the pandemic, there's a lot of changes. Some interviewers prefer that it's done at home through virtual, but generally the most common route is a face-to-face interview. So next thing is also what to wear. 6 out of 10 managers tend to decide on the impact of what you've worn. What you wear could have a big impact on how they think or feel about you. First impressions really do count. Nowadays, there's a lot of flexibility and variety in what you can wear within the workplace. Some companies have a very casual approach. However, that doesn't mean you go in your interview being pretty casual. It's always important to research the company, look at the dress code. For example, most startup tech companies are very young, very ambitious, very hungry. They don't do the formal three-piece suit, so they might not want you to wear it. The simplest way is to ask your recruitment consultant on the dress code. Normally, if you have been dealing with the hiring manager or the HR manager, there is nothing wrong in asking them, what is the dress code for the interview? Dress professionally. By being professional, will showcase your personality, it will showcase your skills and achievements, and it will basically shine through the interview. And make sure if you are successful in your first interview, you get to the second stage, make sure you make subtle changes for your next stage of the interview. Plan your journey. It's quite crucial that you make adequate plans to get to your workplace. Research the route in advance. Give yourself plenty of time in case of delays. At the moment, we are quite fortunate. There's limited traffic because of the pandemic. People are working from home, so this shouldn't really give you too much of a problem. However, for example, right now where there's been severe storm or water, the weather, just be mindful about any traffic, any delays, any road blockage, so you are preparing. In the past, you could normally grab a coffee, sit in a cafe, relax if you're a bit anxious and go over your notes. At the moment, you can't necessarily go into cafes. So if you have gone in car, just make sure you have got time to sit and just go through some of your notes. And one of the things interviewers don't like is when you're too early for an interview. The average time they say is don't be anything more than 10 minutes before the interview. They don't want somebody just sat there because they could be potentially interviewing another candidate before you, and they don't really want that one, awkward welcome of saying goodbye to a candidate. You are sat there. So always give yourself approximately 10 minutes. What should you take with you when you do go for an interview? Take several copies of your CV, just in case there is more than one person in the interview. Not all hiring managers print the CVs out if they've been busy, if they've been in a rush, etc. Most importantly, make sure it's a crisp CV. Make sure there's no creases, there's no stains, and it's not wet, and it's basically in immaculate condition. When you do hand out your CV, don't get nervous, be calm, be organized. in handing additional CVs out. And right now, what's important is make sure you've got your face mask. Take a notepad and take a pen, and that is some of the things you will need to take with you in your interview. Making a strong start. One candidate I recently interviewed recently asked me non-stop string of questions about my personal life, my family life, the job, the company, stuff he read in the news, all sorts of things. But what he never really talked much about is himself. And for me, he just came across as rather anxious, rather scatty, and he was all over the place. The first 5 minutes are quite crucial in an interview. We always say first impressions count, and it's also true in a job interview. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we can make judgments without making or meeting someone. 1/3 of bosses tend to decide within 90 seconds whether they are going to take this person or interview it to the next stage, or whether they will be looking to hire them. So starting strong is a pretty important aspect. From all important handshakes, making small talk, making eye contact is important. Right now, we are in a position where it can be very awkward. Shall I shake hands? Shall I not? Some people prefer to do fist bumps. Some people don't want to shake hands. Always ask them, are you shaking hands or are we not? And most probably they will tell you. There's always going to be that little bit of a nervous laughter. There are so many things you need to be aware of, and it is quite important that the impact you make within the first few minutes could shape your interview. To make sure we start strong, I've prepared a few key areas you might want to consider and make notes of, and what to look out for. First of all, if you have got a face-to-face interview in an office, your interview starts as soon as you leave home. You might think really, but sometimes you never know who you might bump into. We always say it's a small world. You might be grabbing coffee. You might be waiting to get into the office. You might see somebody whom you might just happen to end up meeting in an interview. Make sure you project a friendly, confident, personal air about you from the minute you start off. Make conversations with the receptionist as you enter, because it's highly likely the interviewer will always ask the receptionist, what did you think of that person? They will see every person enter, and they will be observing how you are. Switch your phone off. Don't be reading up on your phone. Put it away. Take in your surroundings. You might notice something in their reception that you might want to bring up. Most companies put their company history on their website, on the reception desk. If they won any awards, they'll have photographs when they were established. It could be a good conversation builder for you. Treat everyone you meet as your interviewer. Remain polite, remain friendly, and you want to make sure you come across as a real nice person, from greeting the receptionist to the person you might share a lift with, or if you have to go through certain interviews where there is an open plan, it's highly likely you might want their work for them. These are the little touch points that your potential or your future interviewer might go through. Sometimes co-workers always share first impressions. When you do work in an open plan, it's highly likely they will be talking about that person, what they wore, how they came across, whether they were nice, whether they were smiling. So be nice to every person. A little smile is all you need to do, and just portray yourself in a very positive light. Why is creating a strong first impression important? Because by creating first impressions counts. First impressions isn't all about talking. It's the non-verbal cues, the smile, being confident, being pleasant, and generally looking glad that you want to be there, you really want the job. When you are sat in an office, or when your interview does commence, lean in slightly when you do talk to them. Show that you are interested, but make sure you always wait to be invited to be sat down. Don't just sit down and start talking. Wait for them. Provide good manners. Ask them, am I okay to sit? And also, when you are sat there, project a little attitude of energy, enthusiasm, and show an interest that you really want to be there, because alternatively, you just wasted your time going there. Interviewer will pick up all these telltale signs and you won't be successful. Clothes-wise, try to match the dress sense of the company. As we talked before, make sure you do your homework on what you should wear and project a little bit of personality or a bit of charisma. And if you're in doubt, always ask. If you're unsure what to wear, always go on formal side. Be ready to do the small talk. Getting small talk, right or wrong, can have big consequences. It's a way for people to build rapport and affinity. So as part of the interview process, think of what topics might come up. Normally the weather always comes up. Normally your traffic journey might come up. Right now, Brexit might come up, or we may talk about coronavirus. Some of the key points you might want to share if you have done your homework about your interviewer is, do they follow the same sporting hobbies as you? You might want to talk about the match that happened overnight. Who's going to win the cup this year? Or potentially you might want to talk about the company, if you've read something in the press, the Brexit, the share prices. It's a little icebreaker, as we call it. In each case, make sure you've got something to contribute. And be on message from the start. Normally, if you look at politicians, they always have advisors and they always tell them to deliver at least 3 key messages throughout the interview. It's a good idea to think about what these 3 key points could be about you. For example, I'm ready for a new challenge of managing a new team. I want to combine my compliance experience and technical experience. Or it could be a case of, in my career, I want to develop extensive digital transformation skills. Look at the job spec, look at what interview you've gone for, look at what your current role is, and try and make sure it can relate, so there is a reason why you want to go for this role. Don't just say it's because I need more money. It just wouldn't look good. It's also important to have answers ready for the most common questions they may ask you. Know your interview questions. Now, you want to make sure you're listening to the questions and tailoring your answers according to what they ask you. You can prepare and understand the nuance of the person who's interviewing you. It may be a great intention that you understand the interviewer and you don't force answers, and it's basically natural. What I'm going to now do is talk about the most common interview questions you will be asked and what's the reason behind it. There are some interview questions you are almost guaranteed to come up. Don't exaggerate the answer by answering the competency questions. Just be honest, just be truthful, and talk through your experiences. If there's a case where a question has come up and you don't know the answer, they respect and appreciate if you're honest with them and just tell them, I don't know the answer. But what I will do is go out and find the answer for you. So how was your journey? This interview is all about putting you at ease, and highly likely they will ask you this question. Avoid one-word answers, and don't be afraid to respond or talk to them or ask them how was their journey, where do they travel from, and it just basically opens up the icebreaker. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Most interviewers start off by asking you about your background and your career history, but what are they really asking you? The most important thing is they want to know, will you be good at your job? Will you be fitting into our company? Keep it very brief because they will go into detail towards the end. And also talk about your brand. What are you all about? Tell them something you like doing. What are your hobbies? Why do you want to apply? How does it marry your ethos? And most importantly, display enthusiasm because it will show up. Why do you want to work for us? If you've done your research and you've done your homework, this won't be too hard to answer. You can basically talk about a new product or a service they're launching. It might be a case that you've studied a subject area in university. You might want to project something that you've read on the social media. It's not all about being professional answers. You might want to talk about something they've done in terms of the charity work they do, or a football team they've sponsored, or the work they do with the local community, and basically align your personal values and how it will reflect with the company you have applied for. That's about your strengths. Answering this question is all about showing a few key areas: your ability to do your job, your commitment to work, and your ability to function effectively as part of the team, which is why they will always ask you about your strength. What we've got to be careful is not being too confident by telling them you're good at everything.
Just got a question here, Brother Mohsin.
Sure. Sure.
Questions come through online on the subject of strength and weaknesses. Is it a disadvantage to mention a weakness if asked during an interview?
If you've been asked what are your strengths, answer your strengths. What you don't want to do is go and talk about your weaknesses. If they do ask for your weakness, there's nothing wrong in giving your weaknesses, because it's quite important that you basically showcase yourself, and also just tell them what you would do about it, what you've learned in your current role, and if you were given this role, what you've learned and how to bring it forward. So they will always ask you what's your weakness. It's a common question they ask, but certain answers you can give is, this is what my weaknesses have been over the years, this is what I've learned, this is what my journey has been, and you are now in this position where this is how you tackle the same question or the same problem. So there's no wrong in answering weaknesses.
Jazakallah.
No worries. Now, when they ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, just don't tell them I want your job, because they'll feel threatened and they might not take you on. The best way is to come across as ambitious, but don't be impatient and ruthless. This is a common problem we all make when we're young. We all want to succeed, but sometimes we come across as too confident, maybe arrogant. I am good at everything, and it just puts the company off. What you need to do is align your goals and your ambition. And the best way of answering is talk about some of the staff who you may have done your research on, or somebody who you know who works for them, or even look at the interviewer, how long they've been in that company, what was their job title when they started, where are they, and just tell them you're here for the journey and you want to basically learn more about their training and development and where you could end up in 5 years' time. So that is a very diplomatic way of answering the question. Tell us about your hobbies and interests. This is a good way of showing your other side of work. It's not all about professionalism. It's more about what you do outside of work. Are you a people's person? Are you a family man? Are you 100% career devout? Is it an interest that could fit in with the team? And it's always good to stand out in an interviewer's mind. One of the questions I always ask them, which I am going to mention as we carry on, will tell me more about the psychology of a person. At this point, they want to know, will you fit in with our team? Will you get on with all of our colleagues? Are you going to be someone who will clash with our clients and our company? Interviewers are relying heavily on a lot of competency questions. One method also includes psychometric and personality tests. To help them differentiate between the talent pool and the competition, there's different ways of approaching or answering questions. What I like when a candidate comes for an interview is becoming a really good storyteller. And storyteller is basically just talking about your career, answering questions in a way where it becomes a conversation. They don't want textbook answers that you've prepared overnight or you've memorized. Our brain works in two different functions. One's an emotional state and one's the ability state. And when you basically are making conversation or you are talking to them right pretty casually and normal, what tends to happen is the interviewer will try and relate to you. If there's something you mention in your interview or in your answer, they will think the back of their head, actually, I've been there, I can relate to that. So the interviewer likes to mirror the person they're interviewing. Also, talking the psychology and the neuro side of your brain, the dopamine gets released, which is basically the chemicals in your brain that basically brings out emotion. And if you present something to your interviewer and they can relate to it, emotionally they'll feel connected to you. So different parts of your brains will work, different parts of their brain will work, and eventually they will think, you know what, this person's actually a really good person, I could get on with them, I like how they talk. Storytelling. Now, as I've mentioned, when you go for interviews, as you get experience, you become a bit of a storyteller. If you go back in college, which friends did you like the most? Or even in university, who were your favorite tutors? Who were your favorite lecturers? You like the one who taught you everything, or you like the one who was down to earth, and you like the one who was funny, because your brain works on the emotional side and it works on the rational side. So try to be you, just be normal. Just show your normal side to this aspect. I've put a little photo of a guy called Neil Breeden. He basically does a lot of visual collaboration techniques. And there's a YouTube clip which I put on, which is all about storytelling. And it's about two graduates. They've both got MBA degrees. They've both got the same qualifications. They've both been in banking, but which one gets the what job? And it's going to be the one who tells a really good story. And that comes over time. But I will suggest that if you are looking to go for interviews, have a read of this clip. The information and the login is at the bottom. What will I be asked? I mean, when you do go for interviews, you will be asked many different competency questions. What we don't know is what they will ask you. And these questions tend to be quite predictable in certain categories. And what are these categories they are judging you on? Your interpersonal skills, your personal qualities, your behavior, your leadership skills, commercial and client perspective, what you like with clients, decision-making process, and most importantly, problem solving. What I suggest is list each of these categories down and write something about you that falls into your personal categories. Your personal qualities could be you're a team player, you're quiet, you're empathetic, you love helping your neighbors, you go out of your way in doing charity work. Team behavior is you work as part of a team, you're the leader, you support people who's not successful. So try and write different examples down. So if you were to ask certain questions, you've already memorized it, you already know the certain questions, and you can basically transfer it into a story. Some of the questions they could ask me is, tell me a time when you had to deal with challenging feedback on your work. Tell me a time when you had to resolve conflict. Tell me a time when your team member was struggling and they had an issue regarding moral compass and how you supported them. These are just a handful of different questions they could ask you. And the simplest way is if you go onto the internet and Google most common competency questions and answers, and you will be given various examples and try to relate it to the role you've applied for. Is it a customer facing role? Is it an analytical role? Is it a research role? And then relate it to the position you've applied for. Telling a powerful story, how to answer competency questions. Thinking of a question is very much telling a story. The most simplistic method is we've all told a powerful story in our time. For someone like myself, when I was younger, when I got in trouble, whether it's in mosque for not doing my homework, whether it's in school for not passing on the deadlines, at home for being naughty, and there's been times when my parents would say, Mosh, we need to have a chat with you. And when my parents mention my name, I know I'm in trouble. And in our head, we're thinking of a story. Well, I'm going to tell them this. This is what happened. And eventually trying to get away with the actual trouble you're in. So very similar, when you go for interviews, you need to have a good character about you. A good character is you. You are set certain challenges. You are put yourself in tricky situations. You are going to go through a journey and you are going to discover the answer. So when it comes to an interview competency question, if you use a format of what it is, how you went about it, what the end result was, you will be able to answer the question. So for your big finish, you want to make sure you come across as positive and you achieved. Going back to weaknesses when the question was mentioned, similar to this, you may have come across an area where you were weak. What did you do? How did you learn? And what have you learned? That can answer any questions on weaknesses. So basically, it's all about learning the process. To make sure your story is more credible and reliable, make sure you put specific details down about what you actually did. Stay on point, don't waffle, and don't lie. If you don't know the answer, just be honest. They would appreciate honesty rather than making an answer up. If you are working with a recruitment consultant, always ask them for their advice. As experts, they will most likely know what questions your clients will be asking, and they will help you prepare for the interview. The most simplest, most common, and most powerful method is known as a star performance in answering scenario-based questions. So what is the star performance? As we've talked about the situation, introduce the situation to the employer and set your context. What was the task? Describe the task you had to complete. Talk about the challenges and expectations they were expecting from you. Action. What did you do? How did you do it? Why did you use this method? You can quite frankly in an interview say, I'm going to use the star performance to answer the question. This is the situation I had. Talk about it. This is what the task was. Talk about it. These are the actions I took. And finally, result. What was the end result? What did you achieve? What did you accomplish? And most importantly, what impact did it have on your team on the company and what have you learned. When it comes to interviews, you never really know what they're going to ask you. But what I tend to do is I always ask a set questions, whether it's for a junior role, a senior role, or a director's role. I was always ask these questions, and it's more to do with your personality. It's more to do with your psychology, because I really want to get to know you. I call this the icebreaker. The 7 questions I will always ask all my candidates. So think about it. If you were asked this question, how would you answer it? Tell me something that's not on your CV. It's because I want to know what kind of a person you are. I mean, on Friday, I had a senior director and he said, I love playing Lego. He's in his late 40s, but he loved Lego. There's nothing wrong with that. It shows he's human. If I was to ask your boss to describe you in 3 words, what would they say? I also asked them, if I was to ask your close friend, what 3 words would they say? I've had answers in the past like, I'm pretty loud, I'm sarcastic, I'm lazy, and that is what your best mate will probably say about you, and there's nothing wrong. It shows that you can be a friendly person. There is a human element about you, and it's not all about professional. Now, I will always ask them, what do you plan to do in your first 30 days in this role? You'll never know the answer, and you probably might not know. But if you've done your homework, you might want to say, well, I do want to learn about the company. I want to learn about my colleagues. I want to learn about my competitors. I want to know how I can become successful. So we can tell a lot about your preparation. And all these questions are all to do with getting to know you as a person and how much effort you've put into your interview. Are you a hunter or a gatherer? For most sales role or customer facing role, I will ask this question. It will basically tell me if you're an extrovert, if you're an introvert, if you're confident, if you're a thinker, if you're an analytical person. But as you get into senior roles, these are the questions that could be thrown into you. What's your favorite book and why? Now, this will tell me if you read books or not. It will tell me if you're an intellect. It will tell me if you're academic, or if you'll tell me whether you love books or you love Netflix. And which book did you read is all about your psychology. It'll tell me how you think and how you plan ahead. Now, it's all about you as a person, your characteristics, what you like as a person, how you'll fit into the company. So these are the questions which I will always ask my candidates. Now, as well as answering questions, there are certain common interview mistakes we all make. It's human nature to make mistakes. I do get a lot of great candidates who basically come up with mistakes. For example, they interrupt, they speak up, they talk negative about their former employers, and sadly, it can cost them the role. Some of my best candidates have not always been technically suitable, but because they were showing enthusiasm, they wanted to learn, they were hungry, they were ambitious, and they would fit into my team, they get hired. While it's important to do the right thing at interview, there are a lot of pitfalls we need to be careful of. For example, don't be apathetic. Show enthusiasm, show that you really want this job, and basically tell the interviewer while you're going for the interview why you really want this role. A lot of enthusiasm will be shown. If you're lacking enthusiasm, you're lacking confidence, you're twitching or you're shy, all this will come up. And if you're not interested, just don't go for your interview because you're going to be wasting your time and their time. If you go for an interview and initially you think I'm not really keen on this role, and as the interview is progressing and you find out a lot more about the company, then you start showing enthusiasm, it might be too late. You may have already put doubts into your job interview. So always go in a positive frame of mind. No matter how qualified you are, if you don't show enthusiasm and energy, you may not always be successful. Just because you are qualified for the role and you've got the right skill, it doesn't mean you can basically just go in and say, I know this and I'm pretty good at it. You may come across as overconfident, arrogant maybe, and it might just put the interviewers off. And again, clients love a little bit of ego. They want the candidate to really want to be there. They are giving you an opportunity. Show them that you are grateful for the opportunity, You really want to grab this opportunity and you are in this role. Avoid talking negative. Speaking negative about your current or your previous employer will not do you any justice or any favors. Even if the company you're going for are their competitors, they don't want negative people, because they probably will think if you're negative about them, be negative about us. And sometimes don't be too honest. If you don't like your current role, there's diplomatic ways of answering. So just be mindful what you are going to say. If you come across as unprofessional, the clients will think, well, there's always two sides of the story. And avoid flimsy answers to any questions. Why are you looking to change your role? Don't say I got bored. Don't say I wasn't progressing. Make sure you give a positive answer like, I want to progress. I've learned everything there is to learn. It's time for me to take on a new challenge. If you don't come across as positive, you will ring alarm bells and the interviews will get put off. Construct answers honestly and in a positive light. For example, I'm looking for a more challenging and varied role. My current role isn't stretching me. I've been here for so many years. It's time to progress. I really enjoy being part of a dynamic team. I can see from your LinkedIn profile, all the staff are very positive, and my job isn't giving me that right now. So the time has come for me to move on. Personal hygiene. It's important that you take personal cleanliness quite seriously. For example, if you stopped off for a coffee, just have mints. It's a good idea that if you have been a smoker, or if you do smoke, or if you do take smoking pipes, try not to do it an hour before your interview, because the smell could rub off. Alternative to that is by using aftershave or cologne. One of the problems we end up doing is when we're going for our interviews, or if we're going for somewhere important, we end up spraying a bit too much because we can get carried away. We can get distracted. We might take a few more skirts. But smelling good is important. By overpowering won't work, because it might just put their clients up. Make sure you don't overdo it. Simplest way is ask a family member, what do you think of this? 2 free squirts is more than enough. Again, what do we look at? We look at your shoes. Are they clean? Are they polished? You don't need to go out and buy a new pair of shoes for every interview. Make sure they're presentable. If you're going to be wearing a shirt, make sure it's clean, it's ironed, it's away from any stains, you've not got any tea drops, and make sure you have got a nice, well done tie. Hair, make sure it's well groomed. But right now, we're all excused with the closures of salons. So if your hair is a bit messy, interviewers understand. Don't talk too much. If we get happy, or we're basically really, really enthusiastic, or we get excited, we end up falling into this trap. We end up talking more than listening. We end up answering irrelevant questions, or sometimes we might end up saying something we shouldn't have really said. So it's always best to be yourself, be natural, and be relaxed. Let the interview set the interview and let them set the tone. Don't become overpowering. Don't become too confident where you're talking, you're interrupting, and you're jumping the gun. Even if you feel that you've been very, very successful in the interview, don't overtalk, don't interrupt, bite your tongue, and wait for the interviewer to ask you the questions and let them lead the interview. You want to basically prioritize your listening and your talking skills. Get the balance right. Be confident, be human, and be humble about it. The candidates that do stand out are the one who are very well presented and they're very confident, but at the same time, they're very respectful. Sometimes being over familiar with interviewers can put them off. If you've known somebody in a previous company, or if they've been your neighbor, or you worked with them before, in the initial icebreaker, mention them to the other interviewers. Talk about a few life and things you have in common, but then put that aside. Don't start talking to them like their first name basis, because it might not come across as professional. And assess the environment. We always say become a chameleon. Look at the environment. If everyone's jumping off walls, or everyone's shouting aloud, just take it in, but don't copy them. What you want to do is just remember what your surroundings are and how you should present yourself. Make time to prepare. We've talked about preparing a few times. So basically, it gives you time to prepare for the interview, build time into your schedule to make sure you know what your interview is all about, who your interviewers are, because there's not going to be any excuses when you're not prepared. The client asks or the interviewer asks you any questions and you don't know what to say. And again, memorizing and reciting off the website isn't going to help you. Interviewers want to look beyond the questions, they want to look deep into the market. So what you want to do is basically be all-rounded and you want to be quite natural about it. If there's anything you've read about them in the local papers, in the news, mention it. It shows you took an interest in the interview. Tell them what makes you interested about their company. Why are they unique? Is there any of your family members who work there? Do you know anyone who's worked there? And basically, if you're going to be well prepared for the interview, all this will come quite naturally to you. One of the most fatal mistakes we make is not understanding the job description. You might understand what the company is all about, but you never really grasp what the job description is. So read the job description, look at similar roles on the internet, look at similar job specs, and look at how your current skills will help you, support you in this interview. Always ask questions. As I've mentioned before, the interviewer has asked you a lot of questions. Now it's your turn to ask them questions. You've got to show it's a two-way process. Going for a job interview isn't just about them wanting you. It's about what they can do for you. It's about where they can support you, where they can take you, and how you can build a future. So what you want to do is ask them questions that's interesting. A lack of, if you don't ask questions, it shows there's a lack of interest and initiative. Be different, be imaginative, stand out. And the best way is research. Now, one of the final parts of the interview is virtual interviews. As you will know, virtual interviews are becoming more and more common. During the current pandemic, companies are using virtual interviews as a screening tool, as a means of facilitating the interview process. You want to make sure you are fully prepared in a virtual format. It's going to be a lot more different. You are going to be in front of a computer screen. You really can't read their body language. They can't read your body language. So the only thing they've got is just a screen against you. So you want to make sure you present yourself correctly. First of all, most students will be doing online schooling, whether it's college or in mosque. So now, first of all, you need to set the scene. Location, and again, making sure you're not being disturbed. First impressions count. Make sure when you are doing a virtual interview, you are in control of your situation and your surroundings. You want to be in a quiet place where you're not going to be interrupted. You also want to make sure there's good internet connection. Sometimes it's beyond your control, but generally make sure you've tested your internet out and it's working. You want to make sure you're not going to be disturbed. And that is not just by family members entering your room or somebody knocking on your door. You want to make sure there's no background noise, there's no laundry, no one's doing the hoovering, there's no building works going on. So that is one of the things you want to be mindful about. Again, if you're a pet lover and you've got pets, we all love a cute cat, but make sure they don't come into the room because it just doesn't come across professional. So make sure you're aware of all the interruptions that could possibly happen during your job interview. And if you feel it is going to happen, you can always ask to schedule a time when it will be more convenient for you. Lighting and background. Facing your light source. One of the things is test your lighting system. Make sure you've got enough light, but make sure it's not overexposed where there's going to be a lot of reflections and silhouettes in your background. Remove clutter. There's so many times when I interview on virtual nowadays, and I always look at the bedroom. Are the clothes messy? Have they hung up? What posters have they got? That also gives me an impression what kind of a person you are. So try and keep it neutral. A blank screen will always help. And unfortunately, due to space and size, sometimes you can't always do it. You might not always be able to have the space. What you can do is download a virtual background, which will give you a nice backdrop of a bookcase, and that could also work for you. Mechanics and technology. What we are doing right now, make sure you share clear, well-positioned image. It'll show you being professional. Make sure your laptop is well propped and it's not shaking and it's not moving. If you have to use books to stack it up because your desk is too low, or by all means you can do so. Try not to use a tablet or a camera phone. Always best to use a laptop. Check if your webcam is working. There's nothing wrong in asking for a test demo. I'm pretty sure they'll be able to accommodate. Audio. Try and use headphones to prevent echoes or loss of communication. One of the things you notice a lot is people using giant earphones or gaming headphones. Unfortunately, this isn't acceptable. We're not all rappers, we're not all footballers, and it doesn't come across as professional. So even something as cheap as this could potentially work for you. And make sure you present a professional appearance about you. Software. There's so many platforms we can use: Skype, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, FaceTime, and Zoom. Make sure you're familiar with that. Ask the interviewer for the connection details. There are times when this could go into your junk folder, so always make sure you're checking your junk folder once they've sent it, and always ask for instructions. If you've never used certain packages, ask them. You've never used it, could you have a test run? Or if any of your friends or your family members have got that package, do a little mock presentation with them, and it will help you get familiar with the system. Internet connections. It's always advised to use a wired Ethernet connection instead of a Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, if you are working from home, you've got other family members, you may not be able to get a direct connection. So what you can do is try and put your laptop as close to the router. If you live in an area where the reception is as good as you would want it, you can always get Wi-Fi or internet boosters. And also make sure you've not got any downloads going on in the background. If you've been watching YouTube, close it off. If you've been watching some movie, close it off, because it'll make your running time become a lot slower. Testing and troubleshooting. Laptops, make sure if it's unplugged, you've got enough battery life. Make sure you've got a charger in hand. Make sure you're close to a socket. There's so many times when I'm doing interviews, the battery is dying and the candidate's faffing around trying to find a socket. It comes across as very, very unprofessional. Cameras and microphone, test it. Normally Zoom packages and Microsoft Teams gives you the option to test it. So this area always can't go wrong. Do a test call, and most importantly, turn off notifications, because it might pop up on your screen, especially if you're sharing the screen. And when that happens, you might end up having something popping up which you might not want your interviewer to see or read. Make sure your phone is on silent. If it's on vibrate, I suggest it's go on silent, because it could quite easily distract you. The best way is just don't have it on your desk. Finally, personal preparation. We've talked about what to wear, your wardrobe, but when you are on a face-to-face presentation, it's going to be a lot more different to a virtual interview, because certain colors can come out different on a camera. Avoid strong colors like bright red, busy prints, or distracting patterns. It can bounce off and it can get distracted away from the interview to your clothing. Try and keep neutral colors. Normally navy, light blue, beige, dark colors can always be a good option, so there's hardly any reflection coming through. And keep certain accessories such as jewelry to a minimum. If you are wearing earrings, make sure they're not big, dangling, shiny things, necklace or anything. Keep it very minimalistic, keep it very simple. And finally, appearance is quite important. Make sure you're still dressed and groomed, because I have had cases where some candidates have been in shorts, their computer's dying, they've had to get up, or they ask them to do a presentation and they've basically been caught out. For females, avoid heavy makeup. It'll just create a lot of dark patches. Just make sure you keep it as a natural shadow. Again, for blokes, if you do shave, make sure you're clean shaven. You don't want to sit in an interview with stubble. And if you do have a beard, make sure it's well maintained and well groomed. One of the things you want to do is make sure your hair's prepared. The very last thing you want to do is when you've come live and you're basically doing your hair up. Right now, we are excused because salons, hairdressers are closed. We're all going to have a bit of messy hair. And again, clean nails. When I do interview face-to-face or even during a Zoom or a virtual interview, I try and look at the nails if I can, what they're looking like. Clean nails will tell a lot about the person. What I've now done is prepared a little guide about what we've just talked about, how to prepare for the interview, the day of your interview, maximizing the first 5 minutes, the most common interview questions you could be asked, how to tell a powerful story, some of the mistakes we make, and how we can thrive in all conditions. And how can I help you? Part of my role involves interview prep. It also includes coaching techniques. It also includes screen interviews, presentations. I also do a lot of psychometric testing. I also help prepare interview questions, career advice, and additional support. In terms of getting in touch, this presentation will be sent over to Team Hub. So if anyone wants a copy of this, I'll be happy to share this. And secondly, you've got my direct details. If you have got any pending interviews coming up or you need any support, feel free to get in touch. I'll be more than happy to help you. This concludes my presentation and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Jazakallah, Brother Mohsin. Alhamdulillah, you've answered all the questions that we had from the viewers during your presentation.
Sure.
And Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. If you can let you wrap up the session.
Oh, Jazakallah, many thanks for the opportunity to present this interview. If anyone's got any questions, get in touch with Hope. Alternatively, you can get in touch with me directly. If there are any topics you would want me to cover in future, by all means, let the admin team know. And hopefully very soon we'll come out with new topics and we will basically get the brochure sent out and all the illustrations. So thank you, Jazakallah khair, for the opportunity. And I wish everyone all the best and in the safe of health. Ameen.